All right, everybody. I got the recording started here, so we'll get rocking and rolling. Happy Tuesday. Welcome back. Today we're talking about the hot topic. Obviously, at this point, you probably have heard about the NAR announcement and their recent news as far as a potential settlement goes. Now, to start this off, this settlement is all subject to court approval at this point in time.
And
And
excellent.
if
We
you
have
watch that video, it
40
could
people.
take several months for that to happen. So we're kind of talking about what ifs and speculation at this point. With that being the case, Uncle Tim, do you want to start it off and kind of give your thoughts and opinions, and we can go from there?
Okay. Well, first of all, thank you for everybody getting on this call. This is probably the highest turnout we've ever had. And it's really nice to see everybody on the call. Hopefully you can get on in the future. If you got my email this past weekend, the first thing I'd like to say is don't panic. Nothing's changed. I know there's a buzz going around right now in social media and on some news stations, and this will all blow over, okay? Yes, things will change slightly, but remember this, we are still needed in this industry. We are one of 18 states that has done it correctly for a lot of years. Luckily, Jim Goldsmith and Pennsylvania Association of Realtors have created the correct forms that we've used for years that basically say that when we sign up a buyer for buyer brokerage, that they owe us a commission and they owe us a broker fee. Although we are willing to waive that if we accept the fee offered by the seller. So we've been doing it correctly all along. Transparently on the listing contracts, we've listed the properties for X amount of commission, whatever the broker's fee is. And on page 2 of the contract, we've listed out what we would pay a buyer's agent, a transaction licensee, and a sub-agent for the seller. So we've been doing it correctly. Now, question number 1 is, are you doing it correctly? Have you been transparent? Are you explaining these documents to these people, or are you docu-signing these documents to these people and not explaining anything? So what we really need to do is concentrate on doing our job. What I said this past weekend is, let's take this negative and let's turn it into a positive for First Advantage. Stop dwelling on all the news that the industry is going to change, 6% is over. Bullshit. Okay, and Brooks, don't edit that out. Bullshit. It's not going to change. Commissions are negotiable. Bobby Stevens for years has been putting a thing in front of agents or sellers saying commissions are negotiable. We charge 5, 6, 7, 8. You pick which one you want. You know, they're negotiable. They've always been negotiable. There's no standardized 6%. Hell, when's the last time you got 6% on a transaction in the last year? Most of the transactions, I bet, are at 5, some at 4, and some people not offering any over the last 6 months. So commissions have always been negotiable. What is going to change is we're not going to have it broadcasted in the MLS anymore as to what is going to be paid to a buyer's agent. And nobody can tell us how it's going to be handled right now, because NAR and PAR have not come up with the forms that we're going to use in order to comply to whatever the settlement is going to be that's going to take place in May. So right now, business is as usual, okay? Now think about this for a second. When's the last time anybody in the last several years has sold a home to a VA buyer and they were allowed to pay the broker fee. They don't. They can't. They can only pay it outside of the settlement sheet. They can't pay it on the settlement sheet because it's not allowed. So are they going to restrict all VA buyers from buying now because their buyer broker isn't allowed to charge them a fee? Is that going to happen? No. This shit's going to get worked out. And don't panic. Do not panic. This is a perfect opportunity for our agents to take advantage of the situation. And I don't mean by doing something wrong. I'm saying by turning a negative into a positive, by being able to say on social media, hey, if you're confused about all the news that's out there, come into the office or come in, let me come into your home and we'll sit down and talk about it and get them under an agency agreement and explain the situation to them. This is a perfect opportunity to show the public how much we're worth. These are complex transactions that we're involved in every day. And it takes an experienced agent like ourselves to help a buyer navigate through this deal in order to get to a closing. We still have value. Now, you can worry about it and worry yourself out of the business, or you can adapt to whatever the change will be and continue to succeed. I'm hoping we all, especially in our company, adapt. We've adapted. I've been doing this now for 41 years. We've adapted to many different changes. We adapted to a one-page contract to a 17-page contract. We've adapted where everybody worked for the seller to buyer brokerage was invented and the forms came out. There's been lots of changes that we've all adapted to, and we're going to have to adapt to whatever this new change is going to be. But my thing is don't panic, use the negative to turn it into a positive, and keep working. Don't let the news get in your head. You know what? As soon as the next thing happens in this world, they'll forget all about this whatever it is, this NAR settlement. Now think about this. Why did they settle? Why did they settle for $418 million? You know why? Because it was cheaper to do that than to go on and possibly lose $5 billion. $5 billion with a B. That's why they settled this thing. And again, I sent you out this morning a link. I might have sent it to you once or twice. It's a great 2-minute video of the president of RE/MAX, Amy, telling us how that they're having a webinar tomorrow for Wednesday for the agents, and it's called Ask Me Anything. That you can get on this webinar, you can listen to what they have to say, and if you want to ask a question, I'm sure you're going to be asking it through a chat session, not probably being unmuted. Most likely those things are done through a chat situation. But you can ask Amy anything. You can ask Kong, Brooks, and myself, or my dad anything, and we will help you through this process. If you have a customer that is giving you a real hard time about this whole thing, invite them to the office. We'll sit down and we'll talk with them about it. And we'll explain and help you explain if you have a customer that's being that difficult in it. The good news is what RE/MAX International has done and what NAR has done is they've released everybody that has done under $2 billion in gross sales or less. They've gotten us all released from this lawsuit. Okay. So this class action suit, if agreed upon by the courts in May, it will be over with. It'll be done. And what it will require us to do is to adapt to a few small changes. Those changes could be where the buyer's concessions for closing costs will come from the seller, which will give them the money to pay the commission. Now, where that could come into a problem is later on, once the market becomes more or less competitive, where you're not having transactions with multiple offers. Back in the old days, buyers were getting 3% closing costs help on a deal that was 5% down or less. They were getting 6% closing cost help on FHA or VA deals. If it's a 95% financing deal and they're only allowed 3%, and that 3% has to come from the seller in order to pay the commission, then the buyer will have to have all their own money. So we're not really going to know what happens until really not NAR, but PAR comes up with the documentation and the rules that we're going to use within our MLS to tell us how to do it. But for right now, everything's still the same. Brooks, did you line up that 6-minute video that we got from the NAR yesterday, or did everybody, if they can, raise their hands if you watched that 6-minute video that we sent out? Because if the majority of the people watched that, there's no need to play that this morning. But I would suggest, if you have not watched it, to watch that 6-minute video from the NAR president, to watch the 2-minute video from the president of Remax International, Amy. And again, if you have any questions, let us know. Brooks, anything else you want to add to some of this?
Just to kind of reiterate what you were saying, this is a good time to have a conversation and thoroughly explain our documents to our clients. Like you said, we've been doing it right all along, in that, the attorneys for PAR put together really well thought out documents that explain everything in plain language to our clients, so long as you're not just simply docu-signing it out to them with no explanation. It's a good time to go into those documents and explain why the commission structure is the way it is, and why it's actually a benefit for sellers to co-broke with a buyer agent, in that you're casting a wider net. When the buyers have to pay an additional out-of-pocket cost, you're limiting their spending power and potentially eliminating buyers from the market altogether. So I always explain, obviously, casting a wider net promotes more competition and ultimately is going to net you the highest price. So again, this is a great opportunity to use those types of analogies and thoroughly explain the documents.
Right. Get in front of more people, get back to basics, explain these documents to them, let them feel comfortable that you understand and know what's going on. It's great points. Yep. Kong, anything you'd like to add to it?
Just that it's more important than ever to have that buyer agency filled out correctly.
Up front.
Up front, like initial meeting, you have to have it. Sit down, tell them how you're going to get paid, and walk them through the transaction. Show them a settlement sheet.
Yep.
Compare the two, with them paying a commission and with the seller concession. One
Right.
with seller concession, so they know the difference. If they can't afford to pay an agent and closing costs, then unfortunately they might not be ready to buy.
This thing was all about money for these sleazeball attorneys throughout this country for a class action suit. I guarantee you nobody on this call has taken advantage of a buyer or a seller. We don't do that. And if it was done, those are the cases I'd like to hear about, but we don't ever hear about it. We know we've done it right, and I know all of you have done it right. So just continue to do it right, but step it up a little bit more. Take advantage of all this negative publicity and turn it into a positive by offering free consultations. If the lawsuits don't think commissions have been negotiable, they have gone down over the last couple of years. Builders have been offering less. They've been offering flat fees. And I know you all have seen it in the MLS, where people have been offering 0.5%, 1%, 0 to the selling agent. This has been going on. And if you haven't seen it, then you just didn't run across a few listings that are out there that have these negotiable commissions in them. There is no set standard fee. We will still get higher fees than what has been listed as a standard fee, and we will get lower fees. My thing is don't discount yourself out. Don't try and panic over this thing and start doing a flat fee unless that's what you really want to do. Continue to work as you've been working over the years, and we will adapt to this situation. Does anybody have any questions or anything they'd like to add to the conversation at this point? Or if you feel differently, please, this is an open discussion to see what we can do to help you with your concerns and questions. Anyone? Jim Penny?
I just wanted to ask Tim, I'm familiar with has gone on, but is there a article that you would recommend reading that, other than what you've sent out, that really explains the ins and outs in depth? And just in plain language, if you could just say briefly what started all this. I know there was a lawsuit, but what were they alleging that led to all of this?
I don't know of any articles that are out there at this point. This news was just released this past weekend on either Friday or Saturday. I think it came out on Friday. And I'm not sure. I know this lawsuit has been going on for years, Jim, but I don't know any of the details on it. But like I said, if there were agencies and agents somewhere in this country taking advantage of a buyer or a seller, shame on them. I'd like to hear what they actually did, because I know that that's not the way we practice real estate here in Pennsylvania, and especially our company. I know that there's nobody that practices dishonestly. So, Brooks, do you have anything or know of any more details on that?
Just other than I think it's competition.realtor is the NAR site that keeps everybody updated with the current news on this whole situation. But Jen, I can also send you the video. I think we did it last summer of when these lawsuits were kind of coming out and being more publicized. I kind of did a dive into them and went through some of the details. I'll send you that YouTube link.
Stacy had sent me something this morning that was the seller's guide, our guide to selling your home. I'm not sure where she got that from, but I'll find out. And a buyer's guide, the same thing. And she says that these are good tools that she uses to help buyers and sellers understand the process. Then there's always the process that we've been talking about, the consumer's guide to the transaction. Do you know the actual name of that document? I can't remember. It's in zip forms. The consumer's guide to the agreement of sale, I think it's called. But that's another thing that, again, if you want to practice safer, what would the word be? To do your job with less risk, okay? I would suggest, whether it's a buyer or a seller, sending them out the consumer's guide to the agreement of sale and asking them to sign off on it so that you can prove, as far as risk management goes, that you did send this agreement out prior to them doing a DocuSign at 10:30 at night and get it back in 3 minutes, that you sent that out a week, 2 weeks, a month in advance to show that they did have that in their possession and they did know what the agreement of sale is about. If they didn't read it after you sent it to them, you know, that it's shame on them, but they would have signed that they received it from you. And hopefully not only would they read it, but they would ask you questions that you could answer. And again, you're practicing it safer, less risk involved. Anybody else have a question? Gloria?
Yeah, would it be possible at all? I watched the news last night. I always watch Channel 21, the local news, and they kind of made it sound really bad. Is there any way we could get maybe 3 of our top brokers to be on the show with them and tell them that our PAR forms are not part of this because we've covered all these problems a long time ago. And they're explained to the consumer here.
Yeah, I think that the best thing that we could do would be maybe send an email. We could all send an email to the Greater Harrisburg Association of Realtors and ask them and PAR to contact the news organizations and let them, rather than a broker, state that all brokers, not just the ones that 3 brokers, but all brokers in our state have been practicing this way, over the last several years.
Because we use our PAR forms and it's all in there
Right.
already.
Right. That's a great question, and I think if we all send something to the Board of Realtors, maybe they could get somebody from PAR to contact the news and try to settle things down. Again,
So,
if I said to you, what was the main topic of the news back in June or July, you probably wouldn't be able to tell me. It'll all pass. But right now, it is a hot topic. Yep, Aaron Hooper.
Well,
I
the
don't know
news
if
are the
anybody
news are
else
just
saw it, but Channel 27 did have Hank Lerner on and interviewed him regarding it.
Okay,
From
so Hank was
PAR.
on Channel 27? Was that
He was.
last night or recently, or?
It was the day that this all broke out that they had interviewed him, maybe the day after.
Yeah, Brooks and Kung, can you try to look that up and Google it and see if you can find that on their website, that maybe it's a link that we can, if we have a consumer that's questioning us, that we have that link of Hank Lerner, and that way we could send it out to somebody that has a question. So let's look that up.
Yeah, Channel 21 was making it sound like these new rules that NAR are going to come out with is going to save the consumer so much money.
Right.
And I thought, what are they talking about?
It's not going to save the consumer so much money. There's a
No.
lot of fake news out there, regardless of whether it's political or whether it's has to do with consumers, but it's not going to save the consumers money. Brooks, can you expand on that? On, if a buyer if their buyer's costs are going to be increasing, they're going to take that off of the price, because before they were offering a certain amount with the seller paying those fees. You can explain that a little bit better, Brooks.
Yeah, as I was kind of alluding to earlier, to me, it all comes out in the wash, right? So a buyer makes an offer up to their max price with all the fees and everything in consideration. So the seller thinks they're saving money because now they don't have to pay this 3%, but that's passed on to the buyer. So their max price that they had before without that 3% is going to be 3% less. So ultimately, it comes out in the wash because they make a 3% less offer to the seller. And, that cost is still there. It's just given to the other party. And like I was saying, the shame of it is buyers right now are faced with an extremely difficult market where they're not getting any closing cost help. They're having to pay historically high prices, and certain types of financing like FHA, VA, aren't the most competitive. So not only that, now they're faced with a 3%, 2.5%, 2%, whatever the negotiated commission is, as another out-of-pocket cost, is just a further detriment to their ability to compete. And unfortunately, it's going to exclude some buyers who don't have the funds saved up to put forth an offer. And ultimately, less competition equals less offers and decreased prices on your home. So that's why, like I was saying, when you sit down with your clients, you can explain that the commissions were structured that way so that you can cast the widest net possible and promote the most amount of competition possible on your home, which is ultimately going to lead to the highest price.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yes, but does that mean if the seller does continue to pay the buyer's commission, that would go against part of the closing cost? And how would that affect appraisals?
So
It depends on if it's a seller's concession or whether or not, if you watch the 2-minute video that Amy from Remax International put out, it's not illegal for a seller to pay a buyer's agent. What we're not going to be able to do is publicize it in the MLS. That's what is going to change. And how it's going to be advertised to a cooperating agent is what PAR has to come up with that complies to the law if the lawsuit is settled in May. So it's not illegal to pay a commission from the seller to the buyer's agent. It's how we market it. And it will not.
I was just concerned about appraisers because sometimes if the seller's given a lot of closing cost help, that goes against the appraisal. In our normal market, now in the market we've had recently, I don't think it has so much, but I just wondered what the
Right.
banks are going to do with it, what the lenders are going to do with it, what the appraisers are going to do with it.
Unfortunately, for right now, we can't speculate on what ifs at this point in time. What we can figure out is how we're going to adapt to what the policy will be on how you market and let a cooperating agent know that you're willing to cooperate. That's the whole idea of the multi-list system, is that we cooperate together, and we sign a cooperating broker's fee form or agency form. So we just have to figure out what the next process is going to be in order to do it legally, until the next sleazeball attorney comes out and starts another suit. And nothing against attorneys, I love them, but this was all about Johnny Manziel. And if you know what that means, show me the money. So anybody else have a question? Kong did put in the chat, and I already sent it out to you, the TV 27 article that Aaron Hubler talked about. We were able to locate that, and I sent it. So when we get off this call, it might be something you want to listen to right away. Was it pretty good, Aaron, as far as his explanation?
Yeah, I mean, he basically explained that, well, of course, being the attorney, he said nothing's set in stone yet. They have to wait for the judge's approval. But basically that Pennsylvania's been ahead of the ballgame for many years now using the PAR standard forms, and there'll be a lot more direct negotiation regarding commissions.
Yeah, and again, who knows how this is going to work out. We just don't know how we're going to be able to market it. It might, if we're going to say what if, or if we're going to speculate, it might mean we have to call to find out if there's a commission being offered. There might be a different field. Brooks, we talked about that last night, that they might come up with the different terminology on the field of a seller concession, right? That they're being offered, which would allow then the buyer to be able to pay it on the settlement sheet. But I just don't know how it's all going to work out, especially for our VA buyers. I mean, they need to take into consideration that, the VA doesn't allow the buyer to pay any of these fees. So, unless they want to discriminate across the country, all VA buyers, they better figure it out and figure it out quickly. So, but they do have till July, because whatever happens, if this court settlement takes place in May, they have till July to figure it out. So they better figure out how they're going to handle VA.
Tim,
Yes.
it's Sue. Just a question. I mean, all the news is really damning. There was an article in Sunday's paper that, of course, had all the negative things about the decision. But my question is, general public is going to be saying, oh, well, I'll wait till July to list my house because that's when I want it to pay all the commission. And unless we're currently dealing with a seller how do you get to them? How do you know what I'm saying? I mean, how do you kind of turn that tide?
Well, the good news is for our agents is hopefully we're out there prospecting and writing notes and contacting people and having conversations. And if they bring that up to you, I mean, that's how you typically get a lead unless they're just gonna call you. If they happen to bring that up, that's a perfect opportunity to sit down and have this conversation with them. The question will be, Sue, will the media continue to print these articles day after day after day about this, or will they move on to another topic? Because that Sunday paper in most houses is probably already in the trash. So they will forget about that and they will move on to another topic and they will be confused about it. I'm not saying they're going to completely forget about, oh, there was an article that said 6% is over. Well, you know, that's what a lot of the articles are saying. The days of 6% are over, right? Okay, fine. We'll charge 7 then, you know, or 8 or 9. There's no fixed amount. It's all going to depend upon what you and the seller negotiate or you and the buyer negotiate. But again, I know I'm not saying that there's not a ton of articles out there right now. It's all over the internet. It's in the newspapers. If you're on TikTok, every other agent and their brother is doing a statement, a video about it. Some are not agents, and some are agents doing the videos. Some are telling us how we're going to be out of the business and we're not going to have a job. Believe me, that's not going to happen. We've been doing this business like this for 116 years, and it will continue on. We're just going to have to learn how to adapt to the new rules. And if anybody has a question, it's a perfect opportunity for, let me come over to your house, Mr. Seller, and we'll sit down and we'll explain it to you. Of course, if you don't want to offer a commission to a buyer's agent, you have that right. You know, I can list your house for 4% and we can offer them 0. But most buyers are working with a buyer's agent. So if you want to exclude everybody that's working with a buyer agent, then we'll just fish for the people that don't have buyer agencies. Which would you rather do? Would you rather fish where all the fish are, which means the buyers that have agency with realtors, or do you want to cast your net into the pond to just those buyers that aren't working with a buyer, that don't have an agent or an agency agreement? I mean, you don't have to be smart about it, but you can explain it to them and make it logical that they're going to choose to continue to do business as usual, that the sleazy attorneys made money off this thing. And if you want to sell your house, you know, buyer's agents aren't doing this for charity work. If they want to do charity work, they can go to the hospital and push people around in a wheelchair. But if they're in the business to make money, they need to get paid. Now, how much are you willing to work for? As a buyer's agent, maybe there's people out there that'll work for $1,000, $500, 1%, 3%, 5%, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. You know, in commercial business, this 6%, commercial industry ranged anywhere from 8 to 10 on a normal basis. 8 to 10. It was negotiable. But there's lots of properties that transfer at 10%. There's lots of properties that transfer at 8%. John Lady, are you still on the call? I know he was on earlier. But John does a lot of commercial, and those rates have been like that for years. So
I'm here.
yep.
Tim,
Gloria, yep.
I often point out to my sellers, the bottom line, of course, is they want to get their house sold.
Right.
And then I try to explain to them the value of having a buyer agent on the other side. You know, your people then are qualified. You know that that buyer agent, if they're good agents, are going to do their job and help me to get this thing to closing with no problems. My sellers have never had a problem with it.
Right.
Once you explain the value of the buyer agent and what they do in the transaction, sellers like that. They like knowing things are going to be okay.
There will be a certain number of people that will listen to these articles and say, I'm not paying a buyer's agent. That's fine. So my question to you is, what percentage are you willing to work for? Because is there a higher risk of you doing dual agency or representing a buyer or writing up a deal for a buyer with them being unrepresented? Are you going to do both sides of the transaction for the same fee? Double the work for the same fee? Or, you know, are you going to list a property that for sale and offer a buyer's agent a commission or not offer him one and raise it if you have to do dual agency? I mean, dual agency, I used to be on these calls years ago, and I would be like, we've done dual agency for 100 years. We just, back 40 years ago, we really were sub-agents for the seller, but we still were there for the buyer. And I never had a problem with a transaction, blah, blah, blah. You know, that was my opinion. Until I started, when my father and I were brokers of a company, and we start receiving the calls while the buyer and the seller are in the middle of a disagreement, you know, right away, one of those parties in the transactions are on the phone with my father and I saying to us, you know, your agent seems like they're protecting the buyer and they're not protecting me. You know, it's hard to service two masters. And in dual agency, you know, what is our job as a dual agent? It's to be fair to both parties, right? It's to be hold the confidences of both parties. Basically, we're a third-party negotiator trying to do the right thing for this person and the right thing for this person and try to get them to an agreement, but not taking sides. But it's difficult because sometimes as the buyer's asking for more, the seller's upset because they think that as a dual agent, you're working more for the buyer. Now, I just heard a story the other day from one of our agents who said they were talking to another co-broke and the co-broke did not want to be a dual agent with this buyer, and they were willing to give up the buyer and let one of our agents represent them. Hey, that's great. That's great. It's, you know, it is very difficult to serve both parties. It is very difficult. And Jim Goldsmith has said that for years. So, you know, whether people can change their mind, I'm here to tell you, I changed my mind. I changed my mind that dual agency is a scary business because I've been on the other end of the phone calls listening to the complaints and have had to get involved in the transactions. You know, sometimes I have to get involved in the transactions and I say, okay, to one of our agents, you represent the buyer and I'll take over and I'll represent the seller. That way the seller feels like they have an advocate on their side, because at this point in time, they're not trusting the dual agency part of it. So it's difficult. Brooksy, anything else, or anybody else have a question?
I have a
All right.
question. It's
Yeah,
an
Tracy.
unusual question.
Yeah.
I think it's a good thing that this is happening because I think we have too many realtors out there. So I think it's gonna drop a lot of realtors down. And I think the people that are gonna stay in the business are people who are gonna be doing business, and these part-time agents aren't gonna want to stay in the business. So I'm looking at it as a positive. The other question I have is I'm kind of interested on home sale services and why they're not part of this agreement. And we all know who Berkshire Hathaway and who owns Berkshire Hathaway. I'm interested to see how this is going to play out for the people that did not settle, and if this is going to continue, or, you know, I just think it's interesting to see how this is all going to play out. And the third thing I wanted to mention, there was a house in Hampton Township that listed with a company in Florida, and they were on the market for 6 months. They offered very minimal buyer's agency, which I think was another reason why it was on the market for so long. And the buyer who came in did not do a walkthrough, and that buyer has now brought in 3 dumpsters. The place was a wreck. He didn't have anybody explaining to him on page 2 that the seller was responsible for getting all their items out of the property. So I think there's a little bit of stories as agents that we can tell of situations where they did not have a professional or someone local or someone there looking after either the seller or buyer's best interest in a deal. and how things can cost and what they can, unfortunately receive when they don't have someone telling them the ins and outs of the contracts, the ins and outs of what's expected during the sale of a house. And that we're here to protect the seller as well as a buyer in a transaction.
Yes. Yeah, thank you, Tracy, for those comments. As you were saying them, I was trying to think and remember them. But number one, the first thing you said is about agents getting out of the business. This could eliminate some agents out of this business. It could. Although those agents that are willing to adapt to the changes like we've had over the years, in the late 90s is when this buyer brokerage form came about, was in the mid to late 90s. And we all adapted to it. So I agree with you, Tracy, that it will eliminate some. And the ones that will succeed were the ones that are willing to adapt to the changes. What was your second thing that you had said? Because I liked everything that you said.
My concern is the amount of companies that are not involved with
Correct.
this
Yep.
release. Berkshire
So
Hathaway, Home Sale Services is the main company, but Berkshire Hathaway, of
Yeah,
course,
I'm
was
not sure why Home Sale Services didn't enter into this agreement. I know Keller Williams and Remax did. It could be because of the owner of Berkshire Hathaway has more money than they have to fight it. Or maybe they're just trying for a different settlement agreement other than what NAR settled for and what Remax settled for. Everybody has settled for different amounts to try to settle this thing. So who knows what their strategy is on this, but I would be like you probably, Tracy, I'd be happier if they would settle this so that the whole thing would go away rather than dragging it out. Because even though I've said on this call 2 or 3 times that the newspaper articles will stop, the commercials or the news media will stop at some point in time about this. As soon as Berkshire Hathaway does settle, it'll all blow up again, you know.
It will,
and-
yes.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. But thank you for your comments. They were really good ones.
And
Anybody
unfortunately, I
else?
think this is
Yeah.
the least of our problems right now. Our problem is the market. Our problem is supply and demand. Our problem is
Well-
buyers agents aren't making money because we're competing against 5 to 15 offers out there and there's no inventory. That's what we should be discussing, not this
Right.
issue in the
And that problem, unfortunately, is going to continue until we see the interest rates start to trickle in the opposite direction. Because what we've had, and I think I've told this story, I don't know, maybe a year ago, my father and I and Brooks had lunch with the CEO of a local bank. And, he sat at the lunch table and said to us, "Oh, yeah, somebody knocked on my door and wanted to buy my house." And he's like, "I'm not going to sell my house and take a 7% interest rate when I have a 3% interest rate now." So even the CEO of a bank wasn't willing to sell his house to a buyer who was willing to pay him a premium for his house because he didn't want to go from 7% to 3%. Or from 3% to 7%. So that supply and demand is going to continue to be a problem until the inflation rate comes down low enough that they start to trickle the interest rates back down. And once it starts to, even if it trickles down slowly, I think you'll see things pick up. Now, on the alternative is eventually these interest rates will trickle down to a level. What that level will be, we'll probably never see the 3% mark again or 4% again, but we might see 5 and we might see 6. Who knows? The only thing we can sell is if somebody is willing to sell their house now and take the higher interest rate now, or take the adjustable rate mortgage now, they can always refinance as the rate starts to trickle down. My father and I own some properties, investment properties right now. Unfortunately, we're stuck with commercial interest rates and not residential homeowner interest rates. Our interest rate, we have to refinance on a commercial loan because they balloon every 5 years. We have to take 8% right now, 8%, not 6 3/4 or 6.5. We have to take 8%. Now, we're not real happy about it, but we don't have a choice because we don't want to sell the properties. So we're going to take 8%, and when the interest rates trickle down to 6%, we'll just refinance it with the same bank, hopefully for minimal closing costs, and do it all over again. But you know, we're experiencing the same problem that everybody else is. But to answer your question again, supply and demand isn't going to change until those rates come trickling down. Anybody else have a question?
Hey, Tim, it's Steve Voorhees. I
Hey,
just
Steve.
want to thank you and Brooks for all the stuff, everything you said today. And I just want to echo a couple of things and just encourage all of our agents to remain calm.
Yes.
You know, I've had 4 or 5 of my clients call me about this. I remain very calm, and I told all of them, look, I'm working for you. I've got your back. I'm going to look out in your best interests. And they all thanked me, and they all said that they trusted me. One of them said they talked to another agent in another brokerage that they saw somewhere, and he was very, very excitable about it and very nervous. And it really, just be careful what you say, especially online on social media. Start saying stuff that's negative, or if you're angry, it's not a good professional look, you know. So I'm very positive about this, just like Tracy is.
Yep, good.
I'm gonna excel in this market.
Take the negative, like I said, and turn it into a positive. And let me point out one more thing that what Steve's saying too. Last week, Brent, Regina, and I took a class with Gary Muccio, okay, at the Board of Realtors. He did a fabulous job. I mean, he seriously, if
Me
you're
too.
taking a continuing, oh, Tracy was on there too. Tracy, you thought he did a good job too? Gary really harped on, don't have a text relationship with these people. So when Steve has these clients that are calling him, talk to him on the phone or go see him face to face and have a conversation with them. Do not have a text relationship about these issues with text messages. People interpret text messages differently. Somebody could interpret it as a positive, and somebody could interpret it as a negative. It would be better, like Steve was saying, to either have a conversation with them. And to be honest, I'd rather do it in person so that you're looking at them face to face. So like I said, this past weekend, take these negatives and turn them into a positive by having more face-to-face discussions, get back to basics the way we used to do business, and we will have the trust and we'll regain the trust of the clients. Anybody else have a question? Thank you, Steve, for that.
Tim, I just want to say one thing. I echo what you're saying here. As you know, you and I are of a certain age where texting is not for me. Okay, I tell my customers up front, if you try to text me, chances are you're not going to get a hold of me because I don't look at it. If you want to get a hold of me, you call me, and if you want to work with me, you will come to my office. I had a new client come in yesterday. He came to the office, and I did my first-time home buyer seminar where I have a flow chart that shows today you've done nothing, and when you get to the end, you get keys, and how that flow chart works to explain the process, the home buying process. Another handout that you give to them that explains what makes up your payment and how you can save money. Just do your freaking job, you know, instead of just like, hey, you want to buy a house? Let's go. You know, you got to earn your commission, you know, and educating people is knowledge is power. If your customers understand how if you've given them the information and they understand what happens in the buying process, they're better buyers, and they respect the fact that you have educated them, because they don't know what a point is. You know, they don't know what a title insurance is. You have to explain this stuff to it, and you got to do your job, you know, and likewise with sellers, you say to them, I haven't heard this yet from a seller, but if they're questioning paying a fee, it's like, well, if you don't pay the fee, do you think there's going to be more buyers wanting to buy your house? You know, like you say, casting a wider net. If you're in people are complaining about there's not enough affordable housing. Well, if they got to come up with a commission to pay also on top of all the other fees, there is no affordable housing. Everybody's going to rent, anyway, that's what.
I appreciate that, Joe, and I agree with you 100%. And actually, one of the things that you said, I said to one of our agents the other week, whether it's a client, whatever type of client it is, you have to earn their respect and you have to earn their trust. And sometimes we expect that respect and trust without earning it. And I agree with you that the more conversations you have with them and the explanation of it, not through text, will give you that earned trust and respect that you're looking for from the clients. But thank you for that. Anybody else have a question they'd like to ask or a comment, good or bad? Believe me, you don't have to agree with me. We're just trying to navigate through this as best as possible and hope that PAR finds the solution as soon as possible for us. But anybody else like to add anything to the conversation? Bobby? Just have to unmute Bob. Yep.
There we go. You mentioned me earlier in the way that I presented my presentation to a seller.
You do it a lot better than I said it.
Well, it's one part of it is, as I feel, is pretty good. When I have a presentation for a seller, I have the listing agreement already filled out, and I have the 6% already put in there, and I preface that when I'm talking to him by saying, look, my commission is between 6 and 10%. And if they ask me why the higher percent and who would pay that, I say simply, commercial realtors get a little bit more than we do. Residential is usually 6 or 7 or 8%. But I said, the other part of that is that in the next line below, you will see that where you're giving me permission to give the buyer's agent half of my commission. So when I say that, half of my commission, their thought is that, oh, okay, I'm not having to pay an additional commission other than, if they don't think it through, you've got clear sailing. But if they do, we can explain that. But by just saying that I'm going to give my half of commission that you're providing me to the other agent for their help in this transaction seems to smooth out a lot of the arguments that they might have.
Yep. Good. Thank you, Bobby. Anybody else have a question, concern that they'd like to bring up? Not seeing anybody. I'd just like to thank everyone for getting on this call today. This was a great turnout. I certainly wish we could all put it in our schedules to get on these things and learn together from each other on Tuesdays at 9 o'clock. So if you could, please, it would really be helpful to everybody if we could share the way we shared today on our Tuesday morning calls. Number two, I'd just like to say thank you to Aaron and everybody who had the chili cook-off contest last week. We had another grand champion repeat of Matt Wall won the competition, and Brent and oh my gosh, Brent got second, right?
Yes, and Tammy.
Yeah, but you got second, not third, right?
Yeah, that's correct. Tammy got third.
Hold on, but Brent got second for using somebody else's chili.
Oh.
So anybody who wants to enter the contest next year, please feel free to go out to your local restaurant or grocery store and buy chili and enter it as your own, like Brent did, to get the second place award.
Kristen was just saying, Kristen's like, wow, he didn't even use his own chili. It was Pap's chili.
Right. So if you want to enter next year, we can have more than 8 participants. Just go to the store, buy your local chili, and bring it in and put it in as your own. Now, in
You
third
gotta
place,
think
Tammy,
outside of the box.
in third place, Tammy, who was the one that I actually voted for. So she was my number one chili. She had a traditional chili, and it was very good. And unfortunately, she got third instead of first or second. But all credit due Matt Wall, because he's won this several times. It's just I'm having a hard time dealing with the second place finisher who didn't use his own chili. So, anybody want to comment on that? They agree with me?
What place did your chili come in?
Well, I didn't actually make any, but my wife was in the bottom two again. I think she did get a vote this year because she voted for herself. So she's no longer a no vote chili.
Okay.
But Regina, are you still on the call?
If she is, I'm sure her camera's broke.
I'm here, I'm listening to you.
Yeah. Did Regina have more than one vote this year? Aaron?
I don't know. What number was yours?
My
Regina?
vote was for the number one chili, which was Tammy's.
Hey,
Hey,
Alyssa
Tim,
had me in her top three.
Yeah, I did. Regina's was really good. I think I did vote for her as my third.
Yeah.
Tim,
But-
real quick,
Yeah.
a text from a client just now. Kong, any thoughts on how mortgage interest rates will change with the Fed's scheduled announcements tomorrow?
Okay. Well, hopefully we get a break and they start to trickle down. But again, everybody, thank you for getting on the call. Thank you for participating in the chili cook-off, and congratulations to Matt Wall. And I hope to God we see you all next Tuesday on this call. And don't forget to do your continuing ed. We got to get that done. And hopefully Poppy gets his done very quickly.
Poppy's already finished.
Okay, so once we get his license renewed, everybody else can renew. Jim Penny, you had one more question?
Well, I guess you just answered it, Tim. I just wondered, can we go on and pay the fee and renew? I did mine.
Yep.
Just curious.
I don't think, has anybody gotten the real estate commission email that says it's ready to be renewed yet?
I haven't gotten it yet.
Get into
Yeah.
But again,
PALs.
the last thing
did
is
get
if
an
you
email
haven't
that
taken your
said,
classes yet, in all seriousness, look up and see if they have that one that Gary Muccio taught. He does a fantastic job.
There was an email that came out that said latter part of March that go check your PALs for the renewal. So
Okay.
I checked it. I think I got it March the 9th, and I went out there. The site wasn't ready yet, so probably here maybe this week. So I guess check it any time. So once Poppy does his, then all of ours will flow through. We can do it without him doing it before us, but we just won't get our license until he submits his.
There was an announcement from them that they wanted everybody to go in and check their phone numbers and email addresses so that their information could go directly to you. So apparently they're having some issues that everybody's information is not up to date.
Okay.
Well, nobody can
So-
ever remember their username and password because you only do it every 2 years, so.
Yeah, that's true too.
And I have no idea what mine is, Aaron, so help me.
I
Okay,
got you.
thank you, guys. We'll see you next week.